In history, there are tales recounted in classrooms and inscribed in tomes, yet the profound realities often remain cloaked beneath polished narratives and neat timelines. These truths divulge a stark revelation. The world's mightiest empires accrued their wealth not from mere brilliance but through ruthless conquest, exploitation, and intricate control. As night falls, we embark on a journey through time to unearth how these empires enriched themselves by siphoning the vitality from foreign lands, and how the enduring legacy of this reality still molds our contemporary world. Envision the treasures of distant nations, glimmering in grand palaces, diamonds adorning royal crowns, spices nestled in opulent bowls, and ships heavy with plundered silver and gold. Where did these riches originate, and who truly bore the burden? Behind the alluring facade of empires lies the sorrow of countless souls whose labor, land, and lives were forsaken. This narrative unveils the concealed history of colonial exploitation, a tale silenced for centuries, commencing during an era when the quest for dominance extended beyond military might to the realms of trade and exploration. The saga unfurls in the age of exploration, as small European kingdoms gazed out onto endless oceans, fervently questioning what treasures lay in wait. Pioneering the expedition were Portugal and Spain, their intrepid sailors charting uncharted waters in pursuit of gold in the Americas and spices from the East. Following close behind were the Dutch, the French, and the British, each driven not solely by curiosity but by an insatiable hunger to conquer. Here is where the seeds of exploitation germinated, not in isolated incidents but through the gradual yet relentless metamorphosis of exploration into domination, with trade swiftly devolving into control and commerce leading to colonization. Initially, ships were dispatched to engage in trade, trading beads and baubles for valuable spices, silks, and gems. Yet as the true worth of these resources became apparent back home, the ships returned, not as guests, but as overlords, erecting forts and mustering armies to ensure the unidirectional flow of wealth from colonies to empires. Thus the cycle emerged. Europe fattened and fortified, while Africa, Asia, and the Americas were systematically drained. This extraction was neither subtle nor inconspicuous. It was immense, violent, and orchestrated, camouflaged behind the pretense of civilization and progress. But progress for whom? Civilization for whom? The reality is laid bare. The riches were hoarded, knowledge was monopolized, justice was dished out unevenly, and the consequences were catastrophic. As we delve deeper into the machinations of empires, a striking transformation emerges. Gone are the days of overt conquest governed by swords and chains. Instead, we witness the birth of systematic exploitation that veils itself in the language of progress and commerce. This shift, subtle yet profound, marks an evolution from brutal domination to polished institutional structures, creating a facade of legitimacy while orchestrating the drain of entire nations' resources. What once relied on the sheer force of arms now operates within the polished confines of finance and trade. At the heart of this evolution lie the great chartered companies that flourished during the rise of global empires. Emerging from a desire for profit, these entities redefined colonial ambitions. They intricately wove conquest into the fabric of business operations, allowing merchants and shareholders to seize the reins of expansion. The British East India Company stands as a harrowing epitome of this transformation, evolving from an authorized trading venture to a formidable entity that vanquished rulers and reshaped political landscapes. Its origins in the spice trade masked a far grimmer reality, as it morphed into a colossal force that enslaved not just land, but entire civilizations, with the weight of its corporate ambitions resting heavily on the shoulders of millions. This pattern of exploitation did not remain exclusive to British endeavors. The Dutch East India Company, one of the earliest corporations to trade shares, revealed a similar trajectory of violence and manipulation underneath the veneer of innovation. Their ruthless monopolization of the spice trade in Indonesia was met with violent enforcement, annihilating communities that stood against them. These corporations operated with the power of sovereign states, wielding enormous influence over international affairs while disguising their exploitation as economic development. Through contracts and treaties, empires learned the subtle art of control, revealing that domination could extend beyond military might, embedding itself into the very nature of commerce, creating cycles of dependency that would echo through history. The narrative of empire thus transforms into a cautionary tale, where progress is often cloaked in exploitation, and the pursuit of wealth can lead to the disintegration of cultures and communities. The echoes of these exploitative legacies serve as a powerful reminder, urging us to question the systems that define our modern economies. As the sun set on empires, many celebrated the dawn of independence, believing that the chains of colonialism had finally been broken. Nations across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean hoisted their flags in triumphant declarations of freedom. But beneath this surface jubilation lay a deeper narrative, one of continuity disguised as liberation, where the same forces that once wielded physical might now operated through economic chains, reshaping the age-old exploitative systems. Neo-colonialism emerged as the modern incarnation of colonial rule, lurking in the shadows of the financial world. The once brazen armies had yielded to an unseen battalion of corporate giants and global institutions, wielding their power not through guns, but through spreadsheets and contracts. The economic dependency that followed the political liberation was insidious. It was an elegant facade behind which the same extractive practices thrived, ensuring that wealth flowed from the impoverished to the affluent, albeit in more sophisticated, less overt ways. Countries newly liberated from the yoke of colonialism inherited economic structures meticulously crafted for imperial gain. Rather than building robust, self-sustaining economies, they were left with systems that prioritized extracting resources over developing local industries. The paradox became evident. While flags symbolized sovereignty, economies continued exporting raw materials, cocoa in Africa, tea in Asia, and coffee in Latin America, only to witness the majority of profits siphoned off to foreign corporations, perpetuating the cycle of exploitation. Independence became a promise, yet the reality morphed into a trap. The true genius of neocolonialism lay in its ability to cloak itself in the guise of assistance. To build schools, hospitals, and industries, these newly independent states turned to entities like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund for loans, forgetting that the cost of this help was often their sovereignty. Structural adjustment programs imposed draconian measures that prioritized opening markets to foreign entities over nurturing local businesses, leading to a further erosion of economic self-sufficiency. Debt became the silent oppressor, chaining nations more firmly than any colonizer's grip had ever done. As loans poured in, they came demonetized by the crushing weight of interest and repayments. The promise of development turned into perpetual dependency, creating a global divide where powerful nations of the North flourished, while the South remained shackled by invisible but ever-tightening chains. Independence was not an end, but merely a rebranding of age-old exploitation. As we traverse the arc of history into the 20th century, we encounter a paradoxical chapter where independence masks a deeper exploitation. Nations emerging from colonial rule celebrated with great fervor, hoisting their flags and embracing newfound sovereignty. However, beneath this jubilant facade lurked a troubling reality. Freedom was often bittersweet, confined to the surface, while systemic oppression continued to thrive in subtler forms. The transition from blatant imperial conquests to the subtler dominance of neocolonialism marked a shift wherein power became cloaked in economic terms, obscured through the veils of corporate interests and financial dependency. This neocolonial structure didn't just appear overnight, it was a remnant of colonial legacies. Newly independent nations found themselves shackled to economies carefully designed for imperial benefit, focused on exporting raw materials while importing finished goods. The majority burdened with the task of harvesting resources, whether it be Africa's cocoa or Latin America's coffee, gleaned little from their labor. Profits cascaded upward to multinational corporations, leaving local farmers and workers in a relentless cycle of poverty. The promises of development, underwritten by their political freedom, soon began to feel hollow as the same exploitative dynamics quietly resumed their course. Compounding the struggle was the insidious influence of debt. To foster growth, these nations turned to global financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, seeking loans to build essential infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and roads. Initially perceived as goodwill, These financial lifelines soon revealed themselves to be a double-edged sword, laden with conditions that decimated public services and privatized key industries. The narrative shifted. Instead of liberation, these countries found themselves ensnared in a web of obligations. Money flowed in, yet even greater amounts exited in the form of interest payments and profit repatriation, tightening the grip of foreign debt on economies that were desperate yet bound by invisible chains. Thus, a new order emerged, maintaining a global hierarchy where wealth remained concentrated in the North, with the South perpetually tethered to its thrall. Understanding this reality invites a critical examination of how progress is measured as the modern age slips into a redefined imperialism, a powerful narrative that reminds us that true independence must be grounded not only in political sovereignty, but also in genuine economic autonomy. Throughout history, the journey from conquest to exploitation intricately weaves through the tapestry of humanity. Today we find ourselves at a critical juncture. Once the question was how empires amassed their wealth. Now it shifts to who benefits from the remnants of centuries-old exploitation. This inquiry urges us to examine the wealth and power structures within contemporary society, revealing how they are not mere occurrences but rather deliberate constructs rooted in the colonial past. To comprehend this, we must begin with nations. The wealthiest countries, those in Western Europe, North America, and parts of Asia, did not ascend to greatness solely due to innovation or merit. Their affluence is built on imperial foundations, where trillions extracted from colonies were reinvested into industries, railways, and banks. This financial injection fostered a compounding advantage, propelling them far ahead while colonies were systematically deprived of industrial growth and education, creating a dependence that persists. The historical tapestry reveals stark inequality. The gap between developed and developing nations reveals lost opportunities, as former colonial powers dominate global wealth rankings. Rich nations retain their standing through systemic exploitation, while many former colonies grapple with entrenched poverty, staggering debts, and economies tethered to low-value raw exports. Such disparities emphasize that inequality is not an inevitable outcome, but a remnant of an unjust historical narrative, the shroud of empire still cloaking the landscape of wealth. Corporations further exemplify this legacy. Many prominent companies trace their roots back to colonial systems, whether it be banks that financed the transatlantic slave trade, or multinational corporations reaping benefits from resource extraction in Africa and Asia. These corporations have thrived on centuries of compounded wealth, solidifying their status while their workers in less affluent nations struggle for survival within these inequitable systems. Moreover, the fingerprints of colonialism linger in individual fortunes that trace back to the days of slavery. These wealth accumulations have morphed through generations, subtly intertwined in foundations, estates, and investments. In many ways, colonial exploitation is not mere history. It continues to engender wealth and benefits for descendants who may not directly connect with the colonial past, yet whose prosperity is inseparably tied to it. Acknowledging this truth challenges us to confront our present, recognizing the uncomfortable reality of shared responsibility and historical consequence.